Graeme is a senior advisor in the trusts area of Treasury in Canberra. He holds honours degrees in commerce and law from the University of Melbourne and has developed a focus on tax policy. Graeme is the project leader for the government's broader update and rewrite of the taxation of trust income. I've had a great deal of to do with Graeme over the last probably 12 months or more, I think, and I did discover one peculiarity of Graeme. He's born and bred Melbourne person who prefers rugby league. He's a devotee of rugby league over the true code, Australian rules. With no more ado, I'll introduce Graeme to talk on the trust rewrite. Thank you, Graeme.
Thank you, Ken, for putting probably more than half of the audience against me. And thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. It's an honour to speak among such illustrious company, and I remember when the program was announced that a few colleagues at Treasury came and asked me how I felt having the Chief Justice as my warm-up act. Hopefully he's left the room. I have to confess it was an honour and it felt good at the time. Then I had the opportunity to hear him speak a couple of times, and he's a tough warm-up act to follow. But luckily for me, I know that the review of trusts is an important topic to all of you, so that's what I'm here to talk about today. So I'll be talking about the background to this review, a brief introduction, although Ken stole my thunder on that somewhat before, how Treasury is approaching this review, a bit of the state of play, an update which will draw on some of the submissions and the consultations that we've been going through over the last few months, and the next steps, the steps from here. So, and I definitely hope, despite the time, I think that there'll be an opportunity for some questions at the end. So, perhaps speaking to this audience, there's no need to explain why we should be looking to update and rewrite Australia's trust taxation laws. Ken already mentioned this before, that the Tax Institute has been one of the organisations calling for reform in this area for many years. And its members, you, have told us a number of times that trusts are one of the biggest sources of compliance costs. So the government recognises this, and it recognises that trusts are a growing and important part of this economy. Trusts are a legitimate way for people to arrange their financial affairs, from running a small business, to growing wealth, to looking after people who can't look after themselves. And trusts are here to stay. However, the taxation of trusts has become increasingly complex. It was over 20 years ago that Justice Hill observed in Davis and Federal Commissioner of Taxation that Division 6 calls out for legislative reform. And more recently, there have been a number of court cases, culminating in the High Court case in Bamford that Scott mentioned today, that have highlighted again this need for reform. The Henry Review recommended updating and rewriting the trust taxation laws to reduce complexity and uncertainty. And Treasury has also heard loud and clear that the interim streaming changes that were put in last year, while they might have been good-intentioned, are complex to apply and perhaps came in a way that wasn't optimal. Some submissions argued or pointed to a heightened level of scrutiny of trust from the tax office as perhaps the source of all of this. But those same submissions tended to recognise that there are still uncertainties in Division 6. The rules are still overly complex. And the Tax Institute, in their submission, identified 3 factors, I think, that are a good way of explaining this growing complexity. I'm going to paraphrase a little, Ken, I hope you don't mind, but the first one was that Division 6 is pretty old, and it's been a long time since its last major redesign. Since then, the world has changed and the tax laws have changed, particularly with the introductions of capital gains tax, and that's one of the key